Hi, my name is Suzanna, and I will be telling you my personal story through social anxiety and depression. اهدى انت بس وكله هيبقى كويس. ما تحكيش لحد بقى، بلاش فضايح. حبيبتي صليلك ركعتين كده وانت هترتاحي. That is the stigma associated with mental illnesses. That is what most mental health patients hear every day from the people closest to them. A nationwide survey carried out in April of 2018 by the Ministry of Health found that 25% of the Egyptian population suffer from some kind of mental health problem. The idea is we tend to ridicule mental health because the pain is not visible. We have this belief that as long as we can't see it, then it's just not real. Now, 70% of children and adolescents who have had some kind of mental health problem have not had the appropriate intervention at a sufficiently earlier age. Now, I'm not going to lie here. 3 years ago, my knowledge of mental health was limited. But it was only then that I realized I was going through social anxiety and depression. Now, 3 years ago, I was just transitioning from high school to college, but I didn't adjust well. I struggled so badly, and I didn't even know why. Now, turns out, many struggle from that same thing. Here, the thing is, I didn't know what I wanted to study. I didn't want to attend AUC, and I felt like I wasn't as accomplished because I wasn't attending one of the top universities abroad. Now, this made me extremely confused. But you may think, so what? Many of us are like that. But to give you a background here, I'm a pretty path-oriented, organized, write everything in your planner kind of person. I used to be that student who would cry over a B+. And so not knowing what I wanted to pursue my career in really stressed me out. So the second my dad suggested that I study architecture, I immediately gave in. What could possibly go wrong with that? It's better than not having a major at all, and now, at least, I have a path to follow. But the thing is, I didn't even realize that I didn't care about it. Now, to not go off on a tangent here, I will come back to my experience in architecture in a bit. But the last and most important reason I struggled was my lack of friends. Now, all my friends from high school were studying abroad. And so to paint a picture here quickly, I was studying something I did not care about in a university I didn't want to attend and without a group of close friends. Now, a Stanford University study conducted in February of 2017 found that individuals with strong social support networks tend to have better psychological gains, better outlooks in life, and even improvements in career, life, and academic grades. And so now, as freshman year progressed, the transition wasn't getting any better, and I struggled so badly. I went from getting A's and A- to B's and C's, and this made me really disappointed in myself. But I didn't want to have just given up in architecture by the first semester, so I pushed myself harder and harder. But the thing is, I was still so much more interested in my Red 1020 research paper or core classes than I ever was in descriptive geometry or engineering drawing. And so I started to resent myself so much for not living up to that standard. Now, I can't exactly pinpoint when my self-esteem went crashing to the ground, but it was around that time. I found that these negative thoughts were controlling my head. You're not good enough. You're failing. Your high point was back in high school. I started to constantly worry that anything I'd say would come off as stupid. This is when I found that I was starting to become really quiet in any social occasion, family gathering, or even group project discussions. These feelings grew stronger and stronger, and consequently, my self-esteem continued to go downhill. And so my inability to make friends and my problem in my not performing as well as I wanted to in my major classes were highly linked. It had created this vicious circle inside my head that I wasn't aware of. It was a self-fulfilling prophecy per se. I found that because I wasn't performing as well as I wanted to in my major classes, I found that I looked at myself as unworthy or stupid. And then at the same time, because I was struggling in making friends, I found that these feelings were validated because everyone else saw it too. Now, by that time, my mom suggested that I would approach people in classes that I talked to for coffee sometime, because I was complaining so much that I was struggling in making friends. But that idea terrified me. I didn't want to approach people. I was so convinced that if I do, they would know that it was because I didn't have friends. And so there was this one architecture class where we had to present our models every single day. And for someone with social anxiety, this was extremely difficult. So every time I would go up there and present my model, I was so convinced that everyone in the room thought it was the worst one, and that they were constantly judging every word I say. But the thing is, my grades were not that bad to validate such a thought, but I was still convinced so. Now, to show how extreme that case was, by the time final submissions were due for that class, I had already made up my mind that I didn't want to continue in architecture. But I wanted to prove to myself that it wasn't because I'm not smart enough, but because I didn't want to continue in that major. And so I worked so hard on that final submission, and guess what? I got a 95, and the professor wanted to showcase it in the gallery. But the ironic part here is that I was still convinced it was the worst one. I just didn't see what he was saying. And so by that time, I had hit a pretty hard point. I was very depressed. I wouldn't talk to anyone, and I was so convinced that everyone saw what I was thinking of myself. I'm going to give a scenario here that AUC students could understand. Now imagine having to walk through the gardens instead of through the plaza or by the steps just to get to Hus, because you were so afraid that someone would see you walking alone and negatively judge you in some way. Now, these feelings were growing stronger, and it was very terrifying for me. I started to show physical symptoms of my mental illness, and I wasn't aware before that these were serious issues. People tend to believe that the mind and the body are two separate disciplines, but in reality, they've never been more connected. Now, I was very depressed and I was completely terrified. The saddest part was that I reached a point where I didn't care, I didn't want to make new friends, and I even drifted away from my family. Soon enough, I started having unbearable side pains and seizure-like panic attacks that would be triggered from the most trivial things. And so later on, my mom had to start riding with me in OPSI classes, because I would experience these panic attacks while driving and would have to pull over. I reached a point where it was towards the end of the second semester, and I had gained over 14 kilos. I would be oversleeping from 14 to 16 hours a day. And there was this one 8:30 class where I'd be 30 to 45 minutes late to every single day, because waking up was the hardest thing I could have ever done. I would wake up and feel like all the energy inside of me would have been drained, and it's just the start of the day. Now, we started going to doctors, and the thing is, they all said, ما فيهاش حاجة, كله نفسي. And so we started looking into going into therapy. And luckily for me, my parents were actually encouraging me to go see a therapist. By all means, they were terrified, but they didn't stop me. During the first couple of sessions, I was very stiff, untalkative, and extremely unwilling to cooperate. But bit by bit, I started to open up once I saw an opportunity to get better. And a couple of sessions in, I was diagnosed with social anxiety and depression. And in that moment, I was panicking and terrified. I felt like everything around me froze, and I was trapped in this little room. That day, I went straight home and searched everything I could have found about social anxiety and depression. And the thing is, it felt like everything fit together. It explained everything. But a moment of panic took control of me. I was filled and overwhelmed with all these questions. What does this mean? How am I going to get better? Am I even going to get better? But then a little part of me thought that maybe this is why I was acting that way. Maybe once I go into therapy, I would get better. I was filled with all these mixed emotions. On one hand, I was terrified that I was going through something that society looked down upon. But on the other hand, I was in a way relieved that there was finally a reason that could explain why I was going through that. The next couple of sessions, I was going through cognitive behavioral therapy, or CBT for short, and I wasn't on medication, so the healing process took longer. And to be honest, there was a little part of me that just didn't believe it would work. But to my surprise, it really helped me. Now, the journey was not smooth. It was very long, rough, and difficult. Therapy was not some kind of magical potion that made everything better. It taught me that there is no off switch as much as I wanted there to be one. And it taught me that I'm not my mental illness, nor do I have to define myself with it. It taught me how to control these negative thoughts inside my head and to not let them control me. And most importantly, it taught me that I'm the one who has the power to control how people see me, and that the power is in my hand, not in these negative thoughts. Most importantly, it gave me a chapter of self-discovery. I came out of therapy with a lot of decisions that shape who I am today. I'm now studying psychology because I saw how much of an impact it had on me and how much I've evolved as a person. Most importantly, it taught me that how to take advantage of the fact that I wasn't currently surrounded with a lot of friends, and go back closer to my family, focus on my well-being, and even go to work with my dad as a way to get involved in the family business. I even started looking at initiatives on campus that I cared about and joined them as a way to regain confidence in myself and get over my social anxiety. I made a goal for myself to walk through the plaza and buy the steps and see that nothing actually happened when I did, and that no one's even looking at me. Most importantly, it taught me that anyone or anything that has been negatively affecting me in any way was just not worth it. Now, this did not all happen overnight. It took many, many months and many slips. And until today, social anxiety creeps up on me every now and then, but I know how to control it when it does. And so I'm not saying that I had to go through this journey or phase to evolve or to become this new invincible person. I'm saying that mental illnesses should be validated, and that as long as there's stigma associated with mental health illnesses, there will always be stigma associated with mental health therapy. Now, luckily for me, my parents didn't believe in that stigma. But there are so many others with worse cases who don't have that type of family support. And so I'm asking here that whenever you hear some kind of mediocre joke about mental or crazy people, don't laugh or belittle it or even validate it, because this is where the root of the stigma stands. We tend to take these extremely significant and important issues and try to belittle them. So take a stand, don't validate it, because the situation is more dire and consequential than you ever think. Thank you. Thank you.